I'm introducing you now to Lion's Mane. Lion's Mane is amazing for cognitive improvement. If you are feeling kind of fuzzy, grayed out, you need more focus, Lion's Mane is an excellent option. They're even utilizing the substance with pediatrics as young as 4 years old. So you have a kid who's starting to, you're worried about behavioral issues and such, look up Lion's Mane. It's a natural supplement and it's allowing improvement in your cognitive function.
Hey, this is Katie Walker with Rethink with Revitalist on how we are changing the narrative of mental health. I'm excited to let you know that we are now doing something called 22 Raw, to where we sit down with veterans. We have 22 real-time conversations, raw video, raw verbiage, talking about real-time issues that veterans need to hear. So I hope you enjoy listening to all of these amazing leaders being vulnerable in this space, helping to make the change that's needed. Thanks for watching. Hey, this is Katie Walker, and today I am honored to be here with Joe Worley, and we're talking about real-time issues with veterans, helping to change the narrative of mental health on Rethink with Revitalist. And we also have Galaxy here,
That's right,
who's in the force. So Joe, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks. I want to clarify that Galaxy is Galaxy with an IE, not Galaxy with a Y. Not like those trashy galaxies out there with a Y. He's fancy.
He is fancy.
Fancy.
Yes, and he gets fresh quick.
He
Got my
does,
face
he
licked
does.
without
He
even
does get a
petting.
little eye kind of gets a smoky eye, and the next thing you know, you're kissing. The one thing leads to another.
So, Joe, tell us about you. Actually, tell us about your shirt now that we're talking about Galaxy Vet Dogs.
Yeah, so I was a corpsman with 2-1 Marines, and I almost went into the Marine Corps like every other, Southern boy in the world. I almost went in the Marine Corps right out of high school, but I'm a mama's boy and got sort of talked out of it. And I'm glad I did, because I ended up meeting my wife. And then, a couple of years later, I just got to a point to where I was, I wanted to travel. I kind of wanted to go to school. I didn't see how that was going to happen. And I knew I wanted to serve my country. And what ended up happening is I had a friend of mine that decided he was going to go in. And then my brother-in-law decided he was going to go in. And I was like, okay, let's just do this.
Let's get on the bus.
And so my buddy went in the Army. My brother-in-law went into the Air Force. And then I went into the Navy and ended up as a corpsman for Marines. So between the three of us,
You're good.
We all went in at the same
Covered.
time and went all different directions. And so, but the whole point, if you're going to do something that important, you go where your heart's at. And I knew that for me, the traveling of the Navy and being involved with the Marine Corps, I knew that there was something there that felt right to me. And of course, nobody knows what they're signing up for when they sign up, but it did feel right. And I have to say, in retrospect, this being 20 years and a month, just over 20 years and a month since my injury, I made the right decision. I'm glad that I went where I went, because I deployed to Fallujah, Iraq with 2-1 Marines in 2004. And I went over there and, first assault on Fallujah, setting up for the second assault on Fallujah. And it was just a huge part of my life.
Sure.
Not just because of my injury, but 11 days before I got hurt, on Labor Day of 2004, I lost most of my second squad to a suicide bomber. So, people sometimes wonder, where my positive attitude or outlook comes from. And I think that a couple of things happened to me that not everybody has access to. I had an amazing support system. I had a church back home, and that's not for everybody, and that's okay. But I had a church back home that sent me deer jerky, and if you can't get better on deer jerky, you just don't deserve to get better. That's just my opinion. But I had a
Where are you from? Which
3-month-old
state?
daughter. I'm a Georgia boy.
Okay, I'm in Tennessee. Yeah, we
okay.
had deer jerky there too.
Oh, so good.
Yeah, so you had a 3-month-old
So
daughter.
I had a 3-month-old daughter I'd never even met. A wife that was I knew was going to stick it out with me the whole time, and my Marines that showed up after I got hurt to take care of me. And as the corpsman, as the medic, it seems awful on paper to tell people that I got hurt 2 weeks before we came home, but as the medic, with a Marine unit, I was the last one to get hurt, which means that I didn't have to deal with the guilt of knowing that somebody got hurt and I should have been there and I could have been there. I kind of just waved them off on my way out. And so between that support system, between me having zero substance abuse issues, I've never even been drunk because I'm boring. Like, I had that. I had a great wife. I had, a good belief system, which helps when you're really struggling. And I stayed in the hospital, and I didn't know that that was a good thing. But being surrounded by the people that get it, who truly understand what you're going through.
Sam Brown's extreme views on abortion scare me. He has supported efforts to ban abortion without...
Sam is here.
What in the heck? I literally purchased YouTube Premium this morning because I was sick of political ads.
Oh, good.
And I just got one anyway. As I'm watching the Amber realizes she's going to jail forever. I love these like interrogation videos. It's like my guilty. I like watching people, lying the whole time and then slowly realizing that nobody's falling for it. Sorry, that's my guilty pleasure.
Love it.
Sam
You don't
Brown,
get drug
that
use one of
wasn't
these
me, I
things.
swear. But sort of clarify my point. I had an amazing support system. I had, belief system. I had a wife. I had a 3-month-old daughter. Zero substance abuse issues, anything like that. It's like I said, I've never been drunk. So, getting off all the meds and things like that was just part of the process for me. It wasn't something that does what some people have to deal with. And I say lucky, I have to give myself some credit because I found that I've gone through, in the past year, I've gone through a lot of like self-revelation. So it seems weird. Sometimes I back talk because I have to clarify a point because we, especially as like veterans, we tend to undermine our own accomplishments a lot.
Yeah.
And so I've had to do a couple of things. And I'll tell you, one of the most important things that I've learned to do is to not talk bad about myself. Because it's so
Which is interesting because
easy.
I was just thinking about how positive you are, but that's a skill set, right?
It's work.
It's hard to be, and it's not optimism. It's always looking on the brighter side, and it's a choice.
It is a choice.
It is a choice, but it's also a discipline that a lot of people don't have because a lot of people have fear mongering, from the news and all these things. Like that's what attracts
and
people.
a lot of
and
things to really be afraid of.
100%.
So it makes sense and it's easy to justify.
Yeah, but you have that skill because you're talking about all these positive things around you. Other people have all these positive things too, but they don't have the positive outlook. Like a lot of people go and they're very negative about everything. And what they're doing is they're training their brain to be very negative. And that's the brain duplicates what it knows. So somehow, even with everything that you've been through, you've had the ability to, I would tell people, I'm like, gratitude's the attitude, But you've been able to be like, like you've chosen, and this is my viewpoint because I'm very positive too, is I know what the darkness feels like, and I choose not to be there. So I choose the light.
Yeah.
And that helps with the, nope, like you look at this way because, you can choose to look at life through either a lens of darkness or a lens of light. And life sucks sometimes. We all know this.
Yeah.
So it's like I've accepted that, yes, life sucks all the time, but I'm going to make the choice to stay in the light. And clearly you do that too, even if there's darkness.
Well, and there has to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't know yourself as well as I know myself without dipping into both sides of the coin. And so one of the things that made me stop and really start reassessing the way I talk about myself is realizing how much power it had. So, I would say things like, I was blown up and I rolled over and put a tourniquet on myself and I put a pressure dressing on my knee and I shot myself up with morphine and I wrote the time on my arm. And I did all this stuff after being blown 4 foot in the air while running. And I would say that I was lucky that I was still awake and things like, and that's true. It could have,
Otherwise you wouldn't be here.
The swordfish version of me getting injured with all, have you seen the movie with the old John Travolta movie? It could have went any way. My 9mm was on my hip, and it was on my hip maybe 7 days the whole time I was over there. But that morning, I chose getting food over getting my gear where I wanted it. So because I carried the mountain, that little mountain bag, and it always sat right here, my 9mm, I moved it up to here. I didn't have time to do that morning. I chose getting food. By the time we got to where we were driving, you don't mess with your gear on the road, obviously. By the time we got to where we were going, we set up, and then about a mile up the road, other Marines set up, and we had no comms with battalion. We were 40 minutes out with 0 comms with battalion. I mean, we had a satellite phone, so it wasn't like, oh my God, if something happens, we're gonna die. But it was scary, especially this was 11 days after Labor Day where I lost half of my, I mean, we got merged into 1st and 2nd Platoon, and because 3rd Platoon Fox Company 2-1 was deemed combat ineffective after Labor Day. And you can look all this stuff up. I encourage you to do so because I love it when people see my guys' stories.
Yeah.
So when I didn't have time to get my gear ready because we're working on the radio. I'm corpsman, I don't know how to work on the radio, but I've spent enough time around it and everyone else is busy. And so we get all that stuff going and everything. And they call us on an inter-squad radio that one of my Marines had cut open the back of his leg while they were setting up. Realistically, Marines, they were probably goofing off. But either way, we jump in a bunch of Humvees. Yeah, you know, Marines, they're eating crayons, they throwing knives at each other. And so we drove up and I picked him up. I'm like, this dude needs sutures, like 20 sutures. His leg was razor cut open and every step he took, it was getting worse. So we tight wrapped him up and again, 9mm on my hip. And we load up and go to make a U-turn to head back to base so I can sew my guy up. And the first vehicle in the convoy gets hit with a roadside bomb. So I jump out and went running up to try to help. And while bouncing between the 2nd and 1st vehicle, and we're on an overpass, so we couldn't do a cordon, we couldn't circle the wagons. We literally dismounted in a freaking line on an overpass and just like tried to roll with it.
Yeah.
And so I was running between the 2nd and 1st vehicle and got hit while running with another roadside bomb. I remember everything. I remember going up in there. I remember hitting the ground. I remember, I don't want, 4 foot in the air may be dramatic, but I remember going up and I remember hitting the ground. And I remember laying there and like my ears were ringing. I couldn't hear anything. And one of the first things I heard was them call over the radio that Doc Worley was hit KIA. And it didn't hurt my feelings because they like gave up on me. Nothing like that. For me, as the type of person I am, what I heard was imagining being on the other side of the radio and hearing that your corpsman just got killed. Like, I was like, I need to move. I need to show them like I'm awake.
Right.
And so that was my first sort of kick in the butt to say, hey, you need to flip over and try to do something. So I roll over and I sort of do a self-assessment and my left leg is basically traumatically amputated. And I was like, all right, we're not worried about that. I put a tourniquet on it and just started working on myself. I started trying to get
so awesome
to the first vehicle and I realized that I was going to kill myself trying to move. I was obviously in a really bad place, but in my mind, I was like, so I was yelling up there to try and find out what was going on with them. And only one of my Marines survived. We ended up losing a Marine, Ebert, and Sammy, one of our interpreters. And but eventually we were able to get more Marines there. And so what happened was when anyone gets blown up, guys, I don't know, I haven't dealt with many ladies who get blown up, but when guys get blown up, there's 3 things. And I'm not being funny. I'm funny all the time, but I'm being dead serious with you right now. 3 things. Am I dead or dying? Where's my weapon? How's my junk? I'm not playing.
You're right.
Because I mean, and if you think about it, what I'm really asking is my life over? Am I going to be able to defend myself if something else happens? If they run up on us, what's going to happen? And then now, like at the moment things settle, it's like, what is the rest of my life going to look like?
Yeah.
Am I going to be able to be with my wife? Am I going to be able to use the restroom like a normal person?
Sure, yeah.
And so if you think about it like that, it makes a little more sense, but my 9mm was busted into 5 pieces. So that 9mm that is always here was right here and got busted off of my hip. And whatever busted that Beretta would have went through me like a hot knife through butter and would have ended my life.
Yeah.
They replaced the entire volume of my blood over the next 72 hours. And I very quickly realized that I was in over my head. I went into all this stuff as a kid, like anybody who goes to war. And on the back side of it, I get home, I got this 3-month-old daughter, my wife's fantastic. I remember sitting in the hospital waiting to see my daughter for the first time, and I got my hand in this little blue tub of water, and I had the second moment, the first moment being when I reached in my pocket for the tourniquet. I felt I had a little pin that had my daughter's face on. I didn't even pull it out, but it was just like my support system right there was already kicking in, because the moment I felt that, it was like, okay,
Grounded you a little bit.
let's stop and focus and do this. The second time was me sitting there waiting to hold her for the first time, and this little blue tub
So
of
you
water.
were fresh from being blown up, and she was 3 months old.
So yeah,
Let's
and
see.
so I got hurt on the 17th. This was the 22nd. I went to Baghdad to Balad to Longstuhl, Germany, and then from there over to Maryland, to where I landed. And they were in state waiting on me, and I just hadn't seen them yet. But I remember soaking my hands, trying to get my hands clean, because I didn't want to hold my daughter for the first time with like blood all over me.
Sure.
Because in the back of the Humvee, not only had I worked on myself, I was working on the guy who lived as well. And I just wanted my hands clean, and I couldn't get my hands clean. And I think that there was a moment there where I realized that they were never going to feel clean.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because I did anything bad. It was because I had been so close to death for so long that I didn't know how to be hopeful again. I didn't know how, and I'm not being like I wasn't sitting there like in this
Right.
moment of depression. It was literally just, I recognized the problem.
Yep.
I was like, okay, I've been so focused on war and death for this period of time. It never occurred to me that I would get hurt. I don't know why. For me, it was, I was either gonna die or I was gonna live. And that sounds dramatic, but I'm not, I mean, I'm dramatic in a playful way, never like a, you don't know what I've been. And it wasn't like that.
It's your emotional intelligence. Like you have a very high emotional intelligence that a lot of people don't possess.
I think I learned a lot of that though. I mean, I think it's something that.
I think we have to learn it. Yeah.
Well, for what happened to me is like sitting there in that moment, I realized that I had to find a way to take that other person, and that person's not dead. Some people are a little dramatic. They'll say, the old me's dead. It's no, you would fold that person into your new experiences.
Right.
And you have to let that child be a part of you again. And I think maybe it was the drugs, maybe it was the hospital. I mean, I'm not saying that I have just so much self-awareness. I don't know what it was. But again, I'm not going to undermine and say it wasn't. I don't know. I can be honest and say I don't know. But I will say that I knew that I was never going to feel clean enough to hold something that was so brand new in the world.
Precious, yeah.
And I sort of, that was like my first indicator of like, I need to find a way to take these two people. I'm a new dad. I'm barely not a new husband. And I'm a kid who's no longer a kid, who's got this old man in his spirit now, that I need to find a way to turn this into a human being that works. And I had a lot going for me. Again, I had a lot going for me. If it can be smooth, I don't want to say easy, but if it could be smooth for somebody, it was smooth for me, and it wasn't. I don't know how people do it without the advantages I had. It was still the hardest thing I can ever imagine. I don't know how people do it and then also add in a divorce on top of it, or losing their home, or I don't know. But I did know afterwards that I needed more. I needed more help. And so I started looking for ways to get involved, because as a corpsman, you get into that because you want to love on people, you want to take care of people. And I needed to find a way to do that again, because I never felt more alive than I did when things go really bad and somebody calls for me. Like, there's something in my spirit that really resonated with that. I wanted to be somebody that people relied on when they needed nothing but somebody that they could love and trust in that moment. Like, to be called on in that moment, that's a responsibility that takes somebody like me who feels so unfocused so much. You're giving me import that I don't know how to give myself. I don't have the confidence to say, I'm incredible, this is what I do. But when somebody calls on you in their moment of need, it gives you that. It's a gift.
Yeah.
And I wanted that back. And so I got involved with nonprofits. I fell in love with the Semper Fi funds. I fell in love with these organizations like, the Old School Wounded Warrior, even despite all the things they went through, they were there for me and my family when we needed them. Fisher House, I love them. I mean, I was in the Fisher House with Tammy Duckworth when it was just Tammy, and now she's a senator, and all these incredible people that we got to meet while we were there. But again, I get home and I'm no longer surrounded by this support system of people that know exactly what I've been through. And I knew that I needed more. I found out about America's Vet Dogs, and I put an application in for all the wrong reasons. I wanted a dog because I grew up watching, like, I don't know how old you are. You look at least as young as me, if not younger. But I grew up with like Lassie and Benji and like,
Oh yeah.
and even Wishbone. If I'm being honest, I watched that as a teen. And I grew up with that stuff, and I just wanted a really well-trained dog. And I put an application in for all the wrong reasons and had no idea what I was getting myself into. And I say that with love because when I was invited to the first on-campus class in 2008, pretty quickly found out that these dogs can absolutely change somebody's life.
Yeah.
I'd gotten up to like 265 pounds, and it wasn't like bulky, strong weight. It was just
Pizza.
weight. And it was pizza and macaroni and cheese, which I love.
Still love
I
both.
still love them. But it was a lot of that. And then, but me finding that spot, finding a way that I could be useful. And so I got involved with America's Vet Dogs. I started volunteering because I hated that they spent money on me. It drives me crazy. Like, what can I do to bring money back in the program? So I started doing solo professional begging. I did, I started doing public speaking and sharing my experiences, and I started working and then I got my first dog in 2008. I had a brand new daughter at the same, she built and born in 2007. And, my marriage was really tough because, you expect who you were, and you have to finally stop and go, we are not those people. I would be a psychopath if I was who I was. Well, I mean, you would be. You can't go through things like that.
Right.
You have to learn how to fold those.
You have to go to
these
the
new
next level of
experiences.
psychological growth. That's right.
And we ended up, doing marriage counseling and everything. And luckily it was like nobody had done anything crazy or anything like that. Nobody's laid it, obviously. If anybody's going to hit anybody, should have hit me. But, nothing like that. And so it was just all we needed was somebody to say, you guys obviously still love each other. You just need to figure out who it is.
Who you are. Yes.
I was like, okay, that makes a lot more sense. I mean, it was just, I needed that outside perspective because you're so tunnel visioned into your own world. And so all this sort of happened in one spot. So like at the start of 2008, I was spiraling. I mean, I was as close to depression as I'd ever been. And I'm not that kind of person. I don't know what I would do with depression. I've never been somebody to let myself get that close.
Yeah.
I've always caught the problem before, but this time I was watching myself like drive into a brick wall. I didn't know what to do about it. And getting involved with America's Vet Dogs, getting my first dog. I started going to the gym. My wife got a 6-pack at the gym, and I was like, I'm the jiggly one? Like, what is happening? My whole self-identity has just been... So I started going to the gym and taking better care of myself, and it's just like everything started falling into place.
Yeah.
I realized that there were a couple of things that I was missing. I was missing the fact that I had been neglecting two parts of myself. I'd been neglecting my spirit and my body.
Yeah.
Because it helped as mind, body, and spirit. And you learn these things, but you don't realize how important they are until you get to a point to where you're like, what is happening to me right now? And I found out that for me, physical health was mental health in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And then getting involved with a program like America's Vet Dogs, and what America's Vet Dogs does, to clarify, we train service dogs for veterans. We don't charge them anything. So we have to raise the money. That money has to come from somewhere.
Sure.
And so we train specifically for veterans and their specific needs. It's not just dog A goes to veteran A. It's, every dog is custom trained. And so, I had something spiritual because I had to be a part of something bigger than me. I was no longer out there with my guys and, Fallujah 2-1, where I felt like I was a linchpin, like I was part of a team.
Right.
And I was needed. I had to find that again. And so, what I would normally say is I was lucky enough to fall in a nonprofit. And what I'm trying to say now is I saw that worth. I found purpose again in that. And it's really helped me sort of take all those lessons that I don't ever want to be 2008 Joe again. I was not doing well. I was spiraling. And I can very proudly say that I am really doing incredibly. I set myself up for success with my 20th year anniversary of September by releasing a book and I'm not trying to sell anything. The book is free on Royal
What
Road.
is your book?
But it's called Wayspring Wanderer, and it's not even my story. It's a fantasy, like lit RPG. It's like a mix of video game worlds, but it's about a Marine who lost his brother. The whole purpose behind it is if you've ever lost someone and you wish you could go on an adventure and get them back.
Yeah.
And that's what the book represents.
Yeah.
Because we can't do that.
Right.
But wouldn't it be awesome?
Yeah.
And so I needed a healthy way to say to the world, to the universe, to God, like, I want these people in my life, and I know that I can't do that again, but I don't ever want to say out loud that it's over.
Right.
Because it isn't. As long as I keep talking about these people,
Yeah, you're honoring.
They're not gone.
That's right.
So there's in fact, the two characters that are in my book, Oscar is just like a mix of a bunch of people. He's in a desert, he has druid powers, and he has a prosthetic leg. I just thought it'd be funny to be in a desert with a prosthetic leg because that sucks. But the two other characters in the book are
It's sand.
yeah, is Fox and Tuwan Fox. So, I there's a bunch of little nods and stuff, but the whole point of all that is of this Wayspring Wanderer book is to create something in the worst month, 20-year anniversary of my life.
Sure.
And then we dropped an album. I'm a singer in a band called the 5'3". There's 3 of us and there's only 5 feet between us. So
That's
5'3", but it's called The Ballad of Jodan. It's on everything. And that kind of does tell my story. It's called The Ballad of Jodan, and there's a song that I do want to warn you about if you do listen, called Final Run. At the end of it, there's a recreation of my injury that I did, and it ends in an explosion. So if you hear footsteps running, you've got a few seconds to go to the next. But what I wanted when I did that album was to take the ear-ringing sound and morph it into the heartbeat monitor sound in the hospital to another song, because it goes from Final Run to Lost Time. And that was like my sort of like, I wanted to put that, and I thought it was going to be hard to do, but when I did it, it was like I took control over it.
That's
it was
right.
a weird,
That's
like,
right. Yeah. Well, and I talk to people about like suicidality quite a bit, and who knows if you were there in 2008, but like I talk to people about like, I think the brain, I have my own like theory as to how the brain works. And I think the brain works through Newton's third law of physics. Like every action has equal and opposite reaction. And I think the law of conservative energy goes hand in hand with a lot of that too. But I talk to people about like suicidality pieces, and it's like when we hit conflict, like our brain likes to be balanced at all times. And balance does not always mean good balance.
Yeah.
It's just managing the polarity forces. So if you feel like super out of control, which rightfully so, everything you've been through, you feel super out of control, the brain can match that with over control. And the thing that is over control is suicidality. When people decide to do a one car wreck to like take their life.
terms.
Right, it's your terms, and because what you're doing is you're trying to balance that because you just feel out of control and you're trying to over control just to do the balancing piece. So I tell people, it's like if you ever have like those suicidal thoughts or like anything, it's like step back and be like, okay, hold on, why do I feel out of control right now? What's my brain doing to do this? Because there's like data that came out that said up to 70% of people actually have a thought of suicide during their lifespan. And it's either, active thoughts or like I'm better off dead thoughts, So it's like if we can like recreate the narrative and say like, when you have suicidal thoughts instead of if you have, when you have, this is what you should do. Sit back, hold on, recognize it's an abnormal thought, put it down on paper as to why you're feeling out of control, and then what are things that you can do to help you to rebalance that control in a healthy coping mechanism, and that's what you've been able to do. Like you have that self-discipline, with all the different pieces, like you were able to get with the dogs, all these different pieces, and you're able to reestablish that balance. But I had a guy, because I love dogs, like I'm such a dog person.
Yeah.
And but I had a guy talking about like spirituality and stuff. He said, a super old guy, like in his 90s, and I was at Starbucks with one of my Danes, and he said, dogs are the closest to Jesus Christ that you're ever going to get. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, that's insulting. And he goes, they are the true definition of unconditional love.
Yeah.
And when he said that, I was like, you're right, I think dogs help us to learn how to love ourselves,
Which is a skill.
It's a huge skill.
And it doesn't come natural to a lot of people. I think with veterans especially, we don't want to be the squeaky wheel. We want to be the one that gets the job done. And so, we want to be the one that gets the job done. And so, we want to be the one that gets the job done. And so, we want to be the one that gets the job done. And so, we want to be the one that gets the job done. And so, we want to be the one that gets the job done. And so, we want to be the one that gets the job done. And so, we want to be the one that gets the job done. And so, we want to be the one that gets the job done. And so, we want to be the one that gets the job done. And so, we want to be the one that gets the job done. And so, we want to be the one that gets the job done. And so, we want to be the one that gets the job done. And so, we want to be the one that gets the job done. And so, we want to be the one that gets the job done. And so, we want to be the one that gets the job done. And so, we want to be the one that gets the job done. And so, we want to be the one that gets the job done. And so, we want to be the one that gets the job done. And so, we want to be the one that gets And so what happens with tough people is you dig a very deep hole before the water starts rising.
Sure.
And it, in a weird sort of way, sometimes people that may not be as strong as you or I do a little better because they recognize the problem before we do.
Yep.
Because a lot of times with people that are, you know, quote unquote tough, really more stubborn, is you, by the time you realize you're in trouble, you have made a series of long-term mistakes.
Leslie would ask, we're out here, you're actually here, and you're asking for help here.
And,
You're not wrong.
and even then you're like, you know, some of the people that drive me crazy coming through the program that apply for a dog are like, you know, somebody can use this more than me. I'm like, I will choke you. You are exactly who we want. We want somebody that is in a place to where they want more and they recognize a problem, but they're not at a point yet where they're like hospitalized. And you know, I mean, we've had people come in and say things like, I want a dog because I just don't want to be so angry at my wife. And I'm like, it breaks my heart to say you have waited too long.
Oh, yeah.
You are not in a good place. We can't help. You know, we don't say it in those words, but in my heart, I'm like, where were you like 2 years ago? You know, like, what were you doing? Like, what happened that made you not push to make yourself better? So we do fostering, and one of the things that was the biggest flippin' eye opener for us was the difference between doing your best and recognizing that it's not enough and trying to make your best better. Because how many people do you know really did their best and just sat in failure? And I don't ever want to be that person.
I hear that. Yeah.
And it's okay to do your best, but the first time that your best isn't enough, you have to figure out what went wrong and make that better. If I don't have the education to do what I need to take care of my family, me doing my best isn't going to put food on the table. I've got to make my best better.
Right.
And then that requires education. That requires like self-assessment and recognizing your failures. And I think if there's one thing that I strive to be that I think that has helped me the most is being teachable, is being able to sit down and pick up on those moments when I'm like, oh, they're smarter than me.
Right.
You know,
and not to be intimidated by it.
No, and look, because you can actually grow it. I mean, the things that I've been through have made me, you know, you talk about EQ, have made me a much more I can relate to people that may have a harder, you know, a higher baseline IQ than me or higher, because I have all this life experience.
Yeah.
And I sat in the hospital for 1.5 years processing all that. And not everybody gets that time. Some people have to like move on.
Thank you for allowing me to sit in the hospital for a year. You're not wrong.
Again, I'm trying to see the good of, you know, the nice parking spot, you know. But really it comes down to like I had time to process where I was able to focus on myself. And you know, there was a piper to pay at the end of that. I had to fix my marriage. I had, you know.
Sure. You had to learn how to be a new version of yourself.
How to be a new version of myself. And you know what, though? I wouldn't take any of that back.
Yep.
Now, it's very easy to say 20 years later. But man,
well, it's the wisdom you've acquired, too. You've earned it.
I've been through the forge. And you know, I learned how to try to make something useful out of it. You know, I think everything happens for two reasons. And if something feels like you're being attacked, you hadn't seen the other reason yet. You can't just be victimhood, while very true and you know, for some people is never a solution.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm not trying to say suck it up. I'm trying to say what next?
Yep.
Okay, you can acknowledge that you've been dealt a bad hand, you know, or a bad foot. But you know, what next?
Right.
Now what?
Yep.
I guess is what I'm saying.
Yep. And you know, I was reading about, who was it? I forget the organization, but they said there's 3 groups when we have significant times in life. There's victims, survivors, and triumphant survivors. And the victims are the people who have the experience, and that experience, they can't grow past that experience because they become a victim of that experience. The survivors are the ones who have the experience. They recognize it, but they move forward, but they'll never be the same from that. The triumphant survivors are the ones who recognize the experience, and they use that experience to do better good for others and themselves. So it's like everybody should learn how to be a triumphant survivor, because you're right. We don't know the cards that we're handed. And when you're talking about like learning to love yourself, I tell people all the time, I'm like, you didn't choose. Did you choose to like build yourself this way? No, it was given to you. It was given to you. Now you got to learn how to deal with it, you know? And so it's like disconnecting that emotional connection, you know, of like, I'm not good enough, or like, oh, I'm not this, or I'm not this. It's like, no, but you didn't ask for your hands of cards. You just had to learn how to play with it. And that's the difference, you know?
And the cool thing about that is the way you worded that, is that the way that life is you don't lose unless you give up.
That's right.
You can play with a Monopoly hand mixed in with a Uno card and a shoestring, and they can't see what's on the other side. You just hold that thing up and you do what you got to do to push through. Because really the only way you lose is when you give up.
Right. You got to learn to get scrappy sometimes.
And you can share cards with people. And so you surround yourself with people that love on you. And I had a pretty eye-opening experience. I made friends with a bunch of fellow authors, and they don't need me. Like, they're like international bestsellers. And I never realized how upside down a lot of my relationships were until I was on the bottom. And so I show up and I got this friend group.
Interesting. Yeah.
And the thing that made me start really loving, like trying to focus on loving myself more, was I finally sat down with one of them. I got invited on this writer's retreat that I could not afford to go to. And they're like, it's already paid for, just come. And I was like, I have never been like a charity guy. To this day, my skin is crawling. I can't stand when somebody does something nice for me. Be mean to me, please. No, So I went on this trip, and I sat down with the guy. I was like, what? Like, I feel like you guys built this mansion of love and friendship and just invited me in. Like, I didn't do anything to earn this. And he's like, he just sort of stared at me for a minute, like he was trying to figure me out. And I, like, in my mind, I'm trying to, like, what is my material worth to you? I didn't realize I was in a weird mindset like that, because that's not healthy.
Yeah.
But he said, have you ever just been around somebody that just made you happy? Isn't that enough? I was like, oh my God.
So simple, but it's so powerful.
But it was like, I mean, but in a weird sort of way, I was like, I had to stop and say, he wants me here because I just make him happy. And that is enough.
Yeah.
And I was like, and then, I had that moment. It's like, I'm enough. Like, it's just me, who I am. I don't have to make this guy money. I don't have to be, he doesn't see me as like, oh, poor tortured Joe with his, with his leg.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Yeah, he's just like, when I'm around you, you're encouraging and you show me love. And he's like, you give of yourself even to people who don't need you. He's like, I like that. He's like, I need that in my life. He's like, he's kind of a businessman. So, he chooses his friends very carefully.
Yeah.
And it was just like, it was a beautiful moment for me, because I had to stop and assess and be like, because I tell people, we give great advice to other people. Like,
He's telling fighters.
You don't get to tell somebody whether or not you're a good friend. It's just so frustrating when people are like, oh, well, I'm just like, no, I tell you whether you're a good friend. Now, you might feel guilty. You may feel like you could do more or whatever, but I am the one that tells you you're a good friend. I'm the one that gets to tell you whether the love that I have for you is worth it.
Yeah.
You don't get to say that to me.
Right.
Because it's my love. It's my heart. And he turned that shit right around on me.
I love it.
And he was like, you make me feel like you are loved to me. You make me feel good to be around you. And I was like, okay. I mean, what can you say?
Right. It's a simple thing.
I wanted to argue with him. Like, no, I suck. But then I was like, no, let's. And I realized that was the problem.
Right. Have the ability to say thank you.
Say thank you when people are like, thank you for your service. It's going to feel awkward. And it should.
Yeah.
It should, because your service should be humbling to you. You should recognize that you were part of something. And when you don't feel that, your head's upside down. You got it on wrong.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome. Well, thank you for your service.
Appreciate it.
And your time today.
I had a blast.
How would they get in touch with America's Vet Dogs?
So you can go to vetdogs.org. You can put application in. All you need is your DD-214 and a pint of blood. No, not really. Just the DD-214. Yeah, 2 pints. And so you can actually apply there, and the process is pretty involved, but the more we know about you, the more we can train a dog to help you specifically.
Nice.
And so the organization is just, I fell in love with the people before I fell in love with the dogs. I mean, you don't get involved in nonprofit to get rich. At least not at the level I'm at. But it is something that is very fulfilling, and something that again, to give myself some credit, I saw there was a need that I could fill, and that it means a lot to me. And so if you have at any point stopped and thought, somebody could use this more than me, you're who we're looking for. Apply. because you're one more person that will thrive when you get a dog. And we got a billboard of somebody who's walking around smiling who can encourage other veterans who might not have the self-awareness to show them like it can be better.
Yep.
It can be better.
Yep.
Help us make it better.
Vetdogs.org.
Vetdogs.org.
What would you tell a veteran who's struggling? When you were struggling, what would you have liked to have heard?
I would definitely say that the whole time we're in the military, we're taught to be a team, to be a part of something big, to be a part of a team. And when we get out, for the stupidest reasons, to this day, I don't understand, myself included, we island. We isolate ourselves, we build a stupid little moat of our own little stupid tears, and we sit on the island, and we're just like sitting there, and we're wearing our sunglasses in the back of the room, and we're not talking to people. I would say that you are missing what you had, and it's out there. That feeling that you had when you were in and when you were serving, it's still out there. You can get involved with something like MCON. You can get involved with the American Legion. You can get involved with the VFW. You can get involved with a motorcycle gang if that's what it takes for you to feel connection to people again. And one thing that these dogs do, one, sneaky therapy. Dogs make people live longer. There's a reason for that. I don't know the science. I just know it works.
Sneaky therapy.
The second thing is these dogs are ambassadors and are a bridge between people who don't have our experiences. And you think you don't want that until you get it. You want to be a part of the world. You want to feel connected. There's going to come a time where you have chosen your friends so carefully that you have run out. And you have to find a way to connect to the world around you. And these dogs are a fantastic way for you to sit down and realize all of a sudden that trauma, that thing that you experienced in war, you can sit down with somebody who is a survivor of domestic violence or sexual assault and look them in the eyes and be like, oh my God, they get it. And all of a sudden you're like, I'm a part of this bigger thing. Like PTSD, war does not have a monopoly on it. There's people out there, civilians that are very military minded, that are very like forward focused. Like I chills because I love people. And there are people out there who don't have our experiences, but they are built different. There are other warriors out there who may not have served, but they've got that spirit. And that's how you connect with those people. These dogs are a great ambassador for you to meet people and feel connected to the world again.
I love that. Yeah. Helps you to integrate. Yeah. And then most of the time people look at the dogs instead of you. And that helps with anxiety.
Thing that I didn't think because I don't care if people look at me.
Right.
But obviously I do because I like them paying attention to a dog instead of staring at my leg
Glasses.
all the time.
You can be on your island with your dog.
Say again?
You can be on your island with the dog.
On my
It's like
island,
glass-
my dog is angry to pet my dog. Angrily. He's like, what is wrong with you, dude?
Awesome. Well, Joe, thanks so much for being on today.
Of course.
Really
Thank you so
appreciate you.
much.
Thanks for all the help
Appreciate
you do. Thank you for watching this episode. I hope that it brought you some insight and some impact into your life. For more on Revitalist, check out revitalist.com. Be sure to subscribe to this as we are going to continue to change the narrative on mental health by bringing in a whole facet of groups in order to help address this global mental health crisis that we are all feeling. So thank you so much to the partners that were on this episode, and to get more information about them, please click on the links below.
I'm introducing you now to Lion's Mane. Lion's Mane is amazing for cognitive improvement. If you are feeling kind of fuzzy, grayed out, you need more focus, Lion's Mane is an excellent option. They're even utilizing the substance with pediatrics as young as 4 years old. So you have a kid who's starting to, you're worried about behavioral issues and such, look up Lion's Mane. It's a natural supplement and it's allowing improvement in your cognitive function.